Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. This is basically a bill on minimum wage and tip minimum wage as well, so really two different bills. But let me start with the regular minimum wage part of it. One economic sign that I consider very telling, which is probably relevant especially for people here, is I looked at what happened at the budget impasse last year. Because there was originally language in the budget scheduled for a larger and sharper rise in the minimum wage, and after the budget impasse it ended up being a smaller and more gradual rise in the minimum wage. And I went down to House Finance at the time and I got the document that House Finance Committee staff, because they're professionals, they know what they're doing economically, I got their estimates of how that would affect the state budget. And what they said was, if you don't raise these, because we're not raising the minimum wage as much, that is going to actually negatively impact the state budget. In other words, raising the minimum wage by more and for a larger portion of the year is going to have a better effect on the state budget than not raising the minimum wage as much. And I thought that was significant because these are professionals. They take a responsible attitude towards their job and work out how it's going to affect the whole state economy and the state budget in particular. And I'm not saying you should just make your decision based on the state budget impact, but that is telling. Especially because when people who make minimum wage benefit and get higher wages, that doesn't increase revenues as much as when higher income people get salary increases, because people who get minimum wage, a larger proportion of their income is covered by the deductions. There's a relatively smaller impact on revenues when lower income people have a wage increase than when higher income people have a wage increase. But still, the estimate was that would have a negative impact on the state budget, proving that not only does this help people with lower income, but also it helps them by it's not just a one-to-one trade where lower income people gain and higher income people lose. It's something that even when you use a measure like revenues that is more largely affected by higher income people, it's still an overall positive effect. So I think that's important, and I'm not claiming that it's going to cause higher income people to lose out at all, but I think it is telling that this is that there is a positive impact even on the state budget and therefore on the state economy overall. And I realize that things like wage increases, you have to be careful about the overall macroeconomic effects. There was one of the business lobbyists warning about inflation, of course we're in a period when inflation is very low, and in fact some economists even say inflation is too low. Let's be realistic. When you have a wage increase, when you have a minimum wage increase, it leads to rise in prices, it leads to overall inflationary effects. Our economy can absorb inflation right now. That's not going to be a big problem. It may even make the economy better off to have just to have the inflation in itself might even be good for the economy, but it's not something we have to worry about. And one of the few things that both the business lobbyists and the supporters of this bill agreed on is that it causes some reductions in the number of hours that individuals work, and that so people do not have to work these long hours in multiple jobs if they don't want to. Of course, those hours still need to be worked by somebody, which is why it's important that when other jurisdictions has passed this increase to $15 an hour, like the Seattle area, the Seattle area has a large economy, but it actually caused, as a previous witness said, it caused unemployment to go down to 2%. And that should be obvious economically. When you have an increase in the minimum wage, it decreases unemployment. That's the natural and expected effect, because individuals don't have to work 60, 70 hours a week, and those hours get worked by somebody else, so other people who don't have a job are now able to have a job. So it has a good effect on the economy at a number of levels. I understand, even though I say that we can tolerate and even could use some inflation, I understand you have to be careful not to have a wage shock when you raise the minimum wage too quickly. But this bill calls for raising the minimum wage very gradually. In fact, the amount of increase in the minimum wage each year in percentage terms under this bill is less than we had in 2014. It's less than the 1-year increase we had in 2014, and the amount of 2-year increase, the percentage increase of minimum wage over a 2-year period that you have in this bill, over any 2-year period, it's still less in percentage terms than the 2-year period increase we had in 2014. So this is a more gradual increase in the minimum wage than we've been used to. And that's something that our economy very much can accept. And I know, of course, people say, well, if our wages were this high in the future, then we couldn't possibly live with that. But that's what people in any period say about the wage levels and price levels that exist decades later or years later after there's inflation, after the wages and prices go up. So people say in nominal terms we couldn't live with wages that were this much higher, but when it's phased in gradually, the wages adjust, the prices adjust, and businesses survive. I mean, businesses are resilient institutions. Places like Seattle that have passed this gradual minimum wage increase do not see businesses going bankrupt all over the place. So it is something that has benefits in a lot of ways. More people, when you have this extra income, more people are able to buy homes, which helps jobs in construction. More people are able to afford cars. It helps people spend more money on other things. It also means, of course, that the state pays less out in benefits, which I think is a very good thing. I think it's much better for people to earn the amount they need for a living. It's much better for people to get the money they need to earn a living from actual wages than from having to wait for state benefits. So if that means that people are going to earn higher wages and state benefits are going to go down, great. But right now, the minimum wage is not enough for people to live on. The standard financial piece of advice that you hear over and over again is that people should not have to spend more than 30% of their income on housing. But with the minimum wage we have now, lots of people have to pay way more than 30% of their income in housing. 30% of the minimum wage every year is something like 30% of a minimum wage earner's income is something like $500, $600 a month. That's not, you can't find housing for that. So it's, you can't find a one-bedroom apartment for that, let alone something large enough to raise your family in. So it's, so it is important to do this because this is going to help the economy. It's not going to lead to automation because as we've heard, the industries where you have minimum wage people concentrated in are places like retail, healthcare, and food service, which not surprisingly are the kinds of industries that are most resistant to automation, where it's hardest to automate the jobs. And that's why they are so labor intensive. And so it's, and of course, more than all this, it is just fair for the people who do so much to create the wealth to have some share of the wealth to get the economic liberty that might allow them to start their own businesses and to be able to live without having to work 70 hours a week. I mean, economies like North Korea or Qatar, where the workers get paid basically nothing, they're not healthy economies. They don't work as well as our economy does, and it would be better if the workers were able to drive the economy better by consumption.
1 minute, Randall.
Okay, so can I go on to the tip part? So the tip part, just want to say, of course there are many places, now the reason, tips are an old custom. The people who did work like serving in restaurants were traditionally considered servants. That was their social status a long time ago. And they were given tips basically because they had to put up with a lot of bad stuff, and the tips are a way of compensating people from that and making sure that they don't that they don't take it out on you as the customer if they have to put up, if they're used to putting up bad stuff. But there are a number of states like California that have the same minimum wage for tipped employees and non-tipped employees. They have not seen tipping go away. Tipping is a very resilient custom, and there's a reason why it's resilient, why it remains why people still keep on tipping even when there's the same minimum wage, because people people feel like they have to compensate the tipped employees to avoid retaliation from the employees over the bad things the employees have to put up with. And I think it's fair to do that, but if you say, okay, we're not going to give you, if you say that tipped employees are going to have a lower minimum wage, so this tip doesn't really make up for the extra things they have to put up with, then you're sending a message that you're still servants, that you don't deserve this extra compensation for the stuff you have to put up with. I don't think it's fair, but in any case, it is phasing in the same minimum wage for tipped employees is not going to cause tipping to disappear. It's not going to be bad for the employees. It's just going to make sure that they can be compensated appropriately by the customers for their good service in the face of some of the things they have to put up with from other customers. So I think, yes, I think that's all the points I wanted to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy.